Welcome to teleSUR English once again. My name is Villain de los Santos, this time from Havana with a special interview. We are very pleased to welcome Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Terrance. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us at this interview today.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to get this opportunity to speak to teleSUR English.
And it's a pleasure for us to receive you here, not only in teleSUR English, but also in Havana, in Cuba. And of course, it's not your first time here. You have a long history with this beautiful country. So I wanted to start by asking you, what does it mean for you personally and also politically to be here in this visit, continuing to foster those relationships?
Well, first of all, just to go from the beginning a bit, I came to Cuba as a young man to pursue my studies in medical sciences. I studied in Villa Clara, the Ciencias Medicas, and I had an extraordinarily good time while I was here. And so I want to thank the Cuban people for all they would have done to help me to become what I am today. Their education, their courtesy, their kindness, and all that helped to form me. So I wanted to start by extending and expressing my sincerest gratitude to Cuba and its people.
And of course, island nations and nations in the Caribbean in particular have shown the world how cooperation and solidarity is a certain path to development, and Cuba is a very important part of that perspective. So I wanted to ask you, you were talking right now about, well, being educated here in Cuba as a physician. What is your perspective on that role that Cuba plays in the solidarity in the region in terms of healthcare in particular?
I think that role is critical and fundamental. I think part of the ideals of Cuba is to extend to other countries in the region what it has to help those countries to become better. That is the solidarity that we speak about. It is a solidarity that is important because I think the more we cooperate with each other, help each other, that would actually help us to become stronger and more resilient countries, help our people to live better lives. And so the Cuban scholarship program, where opportunities are extended to children, especially children of the working class, who many times would not have the opportunity to go to a university because their parents may not have the resources. That allows people from the working class to develop and to advance. And then it also allows that particular country to build its human resource so that those doctors, in this particular case, can go back to their various country and treat and take care of their people. I came here, specialized after, and worked in my country as a doctor. I would have seen thousands and thousands of patients. And as I reflected today, I can clearly say that each patient who benefited from my work, my knowledge, my service, should also be eternally grateful to Cuba, including my patients in the United States of America.
And that is such an important impact that Cuba has had in the world, of course, as a horizon, but in the region in particular. So after that long stay in Cuba, besides a medical degree, of course, what did you take from the Cuban society, from the Cuban struggle also, from that Cuban way of living? What do you carry on from that Cuba inside you now?
Cuba is also fun.
It is.
Yes, I remember going to baseball games. Never played baseball in my country, never witnessed a baseball game live. And to have gone to the stadium here in Cuba and see a baseball game, it was something that was so enjoyable, I'll never forget. I wish I could have seen a game while I was here, but it doesn't seem possible. I remember going to the parks on Sunday afternoon where families would come, people would come. You'll hear the Cuban music, people will be dancing, talking, participating in all sorts of different activities. I remember going with my friends to the Cuban parties. One of my biggest shows that I enjoy in Cuba was Paulo Montañez. You know, he died, and God bless his soul. I really enjoy his music. The band when they will come down to Las Vegas. So apart from everything else, I wanted to be clear that I had fun as well. But in addition to that, I think what I learned from Cuba in terms of their ideals is their ideals of solidarity and really reaching out to build unbreakable bonds with people from around the world. It does not matter. I remember when I was studying, there were American students in Cuba, Canadian students in Cuba. So it did not matter where you came from. The idea was we are one humanity and we must work together to make it a better place for all of us. That principle, I think, is clearly demonstrated deeply in the Cuban spirit and values. But apart from all of that, the Cubans were very courteous and kind. I really would always remember the kindness and the courtesies, apart from having the opportunity, of course, to study medicine. Those things I'll always carry with me. So coming back to Cuba is like I'm coming back home. So I feel right at home. I don't feel like I'm not from here.
Such a nice feeling. And also, internationalism, as you were saying, is such an important aspect of Cuban life. And it's really, you see it everywhere on the streets, everywhere. Every part of Cuban life has that internationalism in it. Now we're talking about Cuba, but we're talking about relations between these nations as well. So, why do you think it's so important to think about these nations in terms of their Caribbean identity, thinking about the regional identity that really unites all of these nations?
The truth is, Cuba is part of the Caribbean. It's Latin American, but it's also very much a part of the Caribbean. I can tell you, looking back at our own history, we had people who come to Cuba in the 1940s and 50s to work in the sugar industry, and they have descendants here in Cuba. I heard the stories of people leaving my country, heading towards Cuba and never returned home. And I'm sure that their descendants are here. Even the great Cuban boxer, his grandparents were from, one of his grandparents was from my country. And so it shows that we are really one people. Carlos Finley, his parents were from, I think, Trinidad. And I'm saying all of that to show that we are really one people. So Cuba is very much a part of the Caribbean as well. And in terms of Cuba really extending towards the Caribbean, really showing how important that relationship is, I think is an example for all of us to follow, and recognizing that we are one. And together we can confront the difficulties and challenges together. And of course, celebrate the triumphs together. We're dealing with issues of climate change, issues of healthcare, issues of food security, issues of, wanting to create our own space and identity and to be respected as nations of the world, irrespective of our size. And so together as a region, I think that solidarity helps us all to better confront these challenges. But there are also victories that we celebrate together.
And what is your perspective on the current state of integration in terms of the region, in terms of facing those challenges that you were mentioning?
I think at this time there is a resolve in the region that we should integrate as much as possible. And I think it's on a good platform, a good setting. I think it's clear. Any country you go to in the region and you ask about relations with Cuba, any other country, the answer is clear, that we are from the region and we'll continue to work together to build deeper and tighter bonds for the betterment of the region and for all of us. So I feel good about the solidarity movement within the region. And I think that even when there are challenges, I think the challenges allow others to see how much we value our integration and the solidarity that we share among us in the region. The Caribbean is one region, and we stand together for its betterment.
And as you were mentioning with the example with Cuba, the healthcare, the education system, and its integration with the rest of the Caribbean nations, that is just one example of precisely that, the idea of finding solutions together to those common challenges. Prime Minister, we will take a very short break now, but we'll be right back. We're speaking with the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Terrance Drew. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back once again to teleSUR English. We were talking with the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, welcoming here to Cuba, to Havana, and we'll continue the conversation. You were mentioning some of the bigger challenges that the region is facing has to do with climate change and the way that the climate crisis worldwide has a significant impact in this region. So I wanted to ask you, on that in particular, you're co-hosting an important summit as well in the coming days regarding sustainability and the perspective of island nations in this topic. So why is it important to push this conversation forward, and why is it important to have it from an island nation perspective?
It's very important for a number of reasons. We're small island developing states. We are in the middle of the ocean, surrounded completely by water. We are on the front line of climate change. Where others might be speculating whether climate change is real or not, we see it and experience it on a daily basis. And what the world must understand is that the cost of climate change is too much for any one country to face. For example, in my country, St. Kitts and Nevis, we have seen irregular rainfall, and that has led to periods of drought and scarcity of water. We never thought that we would ever be a water scarce country, but today we are considered one of the most water scarce country, one of the more water scarce country because of climate change. We see our crops being affecting our food security. Our beaches, some of them are disappearing. We see sargassum or seaweed, on our beaches, affecting its beauty and affecting our tourism. We see the temperatures rising significantly, causing us to use more energy to keep houses cool and buildings cool, which has increased significantly the cost of energy. All these things, and then the impact on health, significant, stronger hurricanes, more frequent storms. One storm can wipe out 100% of our GDP. One storm. And so we are really at the peril of nature with respect to climate change. And that is why we are calling for climate justice. Why climate justice? We did not create the problem. We don't contribute to the problem. It's very negligible. As a matter of fact, our ocean and our forests, I think, taking more of carbon dioxide from than what we produce. So therefore, we are naturally helping the problem, yet we suffer the most. So it's not a question of pity or handouts. We're not asking for those things. We are proud people. We're asking for justice, climate justice. And so we are saying to the world, and especially what we term to be the industrialized world that is responsible for this problem, we're asking them to be on the front line to resolve the problem. And so that is why it's important that those who suffer most and contributed less should be at the front line, advocating fiercely for climate justice. And so to that extent, that is why we are hosting the GSIS, the Global Sustainable Island Summit, which was last held in Prince Edward Island in Canada. I went there and met with the governor in Canada for Prince Edward Island. And Island Innovation is now bringing it to St. Kitts and Nevis. And we want to use that summit, that platform, to continue to call for climate justice, but to build solidarity with like-minded people so that we can find real solutions. So that summit will not be about complaining about climate justice. It will be about finding solutions to the climate crisis. And so I would like to invite teleSUR. You are invited. As you know, you covered teleSUR English, cover the Caribbean. This is a major summit in the Caribbean, and teleSUR is also invited. But that is important for us to continue to call for climate justice and to build solidarity around the issue so that we can find solutions for all of our peoples.
We'll definitely keep in mind and be looking out for what is happening in that summit in the coming days. And you were talking about the necessity of finding solutions, and we were talking about internationalism before, and this is of course an international struggle, something that cannot be solved by just one nation alone, but as you were saying, it's a complex challenge that hits some the hardest. So in terms of the international arena, what are the concrete steps that could be taken? There are some mechanisms that are already enforced but have to be put into action. What should we look in terms of international cooperation to find solutions to these problems?
First of all, I think we have started the process to establish that there's climate change, and climate change is caused by the activity of man. That has to be established. And I think there's great work there, even though there are some deniers. Now we have what you call COP28, where all the countries come together to really discuss the issues of climate change and to find solutions. What are the impacts and what are the solutions? And I want to encourage that whatever resolutions come from COP, that they are followed through. Because many instances there are pledges of billions of dollars. And then when you look at what is actually collected, is a small drop in the bucket, which says there is no real commitment to dealing with the climate issue. That is a concrete step that can be taken so that the countries that are affected most can have the resources to build resilience and, of course, to continue their path of development and to decrease significantly their vulnerability to the climate change. In addition to that, there's some specific things that we would like to be accepted, such as loss and damage as a concept, so that can help us to have access to financing, concessionary financing and grants to help us to really build climate resilience. However, it has been recently advanced to be accepted even more. And then we're asking that instead of judging us on our GDP per capita, because we are small economies, so our GDP per capita does not tell the real story, because we are small economies. Our GDP per capita might seem high, but the economies are small. And so we're asking that we be judged on something called the Multi-Vulnerability Index, where you look at our vulnerability and you determine if we should have access to grants and concessionary lending. We think those things can help tremendously, and to look at what we would say the financial architecture as was put forward by the Bridgetown Accord that has in it at its root financial justice that would help to really deal with the scourge of climate change that's affecting countries like us here in the region as island developing states. So I think that there are some concrete things that can take place to open up access to financing, access to grants, and of course to help to push forward at the United Nations level, I would say, certain matters that can favorably impact how climate change is being seen and dealt with in small island developing states. So I think those are some concrete. But outside of that, even if those things were not to happen, we are not going to just sit by as sitting ducks and be at the mercy of climate change. We are going to fight back, and we're going to build solidarity with those who are serious about changing the way in which we approach the issue of climate change. And Cuba is one of those countries who that is positioned really to build that type of solidarity with, to help to deal with this scourge, this new crisis, man-made crisis, the crisis of climate change.
You were just talking about the financial justice as well. And I think it's very important to make clear that idea that the climate injustice does not only have to do with those natural disasters, but has a direct impact on the economies, particularly of these nations that we are talking about. Could you explain a little bit more on that? How does the climate crisis in islands, in nations like the Caribbean islands, impact that economy? And why does that need to change? What are you advocating for a change in the financial architecture, for example?
Exactly. So, for example, we know the cost, or it has been estimated, of what will be the cost to deal with what we call adaptation to climate change. That cost is multiple times our GDP, which means by ourselves we'll never be able to afford it. However, we still don't have access to concessionary lending, and we don't have access to grants, for example. The financial architecture works against us. And if that does not change, the chances of us having access to the necessary financial resources based on the current structure will be very challenging. And so we will not be able to really access the type of resources to deal with the climate change matter. And that is why we want a change in the financial architecture. The way you judge us, do not judge us by GDP per capita. Consider loss and damage, the multi-vulnerability index. When you talk about insurance of our countries, where the cost of living is going to go up because there are insurance companies who will not insure our countries because of the fear of severe storms that can affect the countries and, of course, affect their bottom line. So this climate crisis is almost creating the perfect recipe for us not to be countries, or for us not to exist from a physical perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And that is why we are saying that the architecture must change. And again, I'll refer anyone to the Bridgetown initiative that has in it practical ways that can be adopted to deal with the issue of the financial injustice in the world today.
It's clear. And just final thoughts before we wrap today. Are you confident that solidarity can find those solutions that we need?
Yes, there's always hope. There's hope. We have to continue with that great hope in humanity that we must never, ever lose. If we lose hope, we lose it all. But I also believe that we have the capacity to respond. As human beings, we have responded over the centuries. And I also believe in God. And with God's help, I'm sure that we'll overcome. But it takes great work. We must work towards it. So I'm sure that the solidarity will continue to build because we have seen tremendous movement. I'm in Cuba now, and I met with the president. And of course, there's greater solidarity there. Later this year, we'll have the CARICOM meeting, where all of CARICOM, which are 14 nations in the Caribbean, will come together, building greater solidarity. Later that year, we would, of course, have CARICOM and Cuba Summit, building greater solidarity. And of course, across the whole of Latin America, where we have CELAC and ALBA, where we'll continue to build solidarity. St. Kitts and Nevis is a country that seeks to build solidarity with all nations so that together we can create a better world for all of us. So solidarity is a must if we are to survive the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us today in teleSUR English. It's been our pleasure.
And it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So we were speaking with the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Terrance, here in teleSUR English. We will continue updating on more of these topics. Of course, stay tuned for further interviews. And for now, thank you for joining us. Welcome to teleSUR English once again. And my name is Villain de los Santos, this time from Havana, with a special interview. We are very pleased to welcome Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Terrance. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us at this interview today.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to get this opportunity to speak to teleSUR English.
And it's a pleasure for us to receive you here, not only in teleSUR English, but also in Havana, in Cuba. And of course, it's not your first time here. You have a long history with this beautiful country. So I wanted to start by asking you, what does it mean for you personally and also politically to be here in this visit